They've done their time and they're going home.
We're free. Thanks to sin, we're free.
Each weekday, Huntsville Prison releases scores of inmates into the arms of loved ones. Those without families to meet them walk to the bus depot, their belongings in a bag and a one-way ticket in their pocket. In Texas, there are more than 700,000 people in prison on parole or on probation. That's 5% of the adult population. Nearly all of them are poor.
Don't ever come to Texas or the United States and commit no crime. And I'm serious.
Texas doesn't have a legal aid or public defender system. If you can't afford a lawyer, and an overwhelming number of defendants can't, the judge appoints one, sometimes with disastrous consequences.
They have a little sign that they have entering Texas that says, "Don't mess with Texas." They mean it. Don't mess with Texas.
It's plain and simple. You come to Texas on vacation, you leave on probation, you'll come back on violation. They're serious. They don't play around.
They head south, free at last. Many of the prisoners left behind in the Texas jail system will never be released, including the 400 men and women on death row. George McFarland is one of them. He asked to shake my hand, the death row way. You've got a big hand.
Yeah, the guards tell me that all the time when they're putting handcuffs on me. Yeah.
McFarland is waiting to die for a crime he says he didn't commit.
But yes, I am worried. I do get nervous. Every time my case moved to another level, because I was turned down from the level that we was just on, I get more scared. Because I'm like, if they didn't see the truth here, and now they have to go to this level, when are they going to see the truth?
Back there, having a red hat, a red shirt.
McFarland's journey to death row began 16 years ago. These are the police photos of the crime scene, taken soon after a shopkeeper was ambushed, robbed and shot in the chest and back. McFarland was arrested. The police didn't have a confession or any forensic evidence linking him to the murder. What they did have was a witness who said she didn't get a good look at the killer, but picked McFarland out of this lineup.
Look straight ahead. Repeat your words. Grab the bag, grab the bag.
Grab the bag, grab the bag.
With his life on the line, George McFarland got two attorneys. One had never tried a capital case, and the lead lawyer, John Bine, was 72 years old. Ben spent 4 hours preparing before the trial, and during it, he cross-examined just 3 of the state's 14 witnesses. At key points in a capital case, the defense rested. Literally.
John Ben slept so hard he was snoring. John Ben slept so hard that he would snore and almost fall out the chair. And this is the God's truth.
Now, did this happen just once, or was it something that happened repeatedly or continuously?
John Ben slept so much that I couldn't even give you an accurate count how many times we tried to wake him up.
2 days after the trial started, the jury found George McFarland guilty. He received a death sentence.
I wanted to just reach across there and just scream, just shake him and scream and tell him, what are you doing? You promised me that the truth would come out. You promised me that I wouldn't go to prison for the rest of my life. You promised me you wasn't gonna let these people kill me for something I didn't do. Then you come in here and you went to sleep and you did nothing.
So how did the courts react? Well, the trial judge declared that even though the Constitution says everyone has the right to a lawyer, it doesn't say the lawyer has to be awake. A higher court upheld the verdict, and some of its judges said the sleeping lawyer could have been a tactic to win sympathy from the jury. George McFarland got no sympathy. He sits on death row, wondering what would have happened if he'd been able to afford a proper lawyer. In neighbouring Louisiana, a great city is slowly coming back to life. New Orleans seems upbeat enough, but it's a crime capital. There have been more than 80 murders so far this year. Unlike Texas, Louisiana operates a public defender system for people who can't afford a lawyer. You won't believe how it's funded. Put it this way, if you're poor and accused of a serious crime, a parking fine could be your only ticket to freedom.
However many parking tickets or speeding tickets are written, that's how much money the Public Defender Office in a particular area gets.
So if your life is on the line, you're facing the death penalty, the quality of your defence relates to the number of parking fines and speeding tickets in the area you're being tried in.
Absolutely. When there's been different periods, the most notable of which was Katrina, where there's no revenue or reduced revenue from speeding and parking fines. And suddenly the Public Defender Office is bankrupt. And I mean, it becomes so ridiculous that one of the Public Defender's officers invested in a speed gun for the local police force to increase revenue so that they could get some more money back. So behind us, that's a guy who was sentenced to death in Mississippi.
Richard Bourke is an Australian lawyer working in New Orleans. He fights to get prisoners off death row in what he calls the Death Belt: Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas.
Another Mississippi case up there. She was sentenced to death. We got that reversed and then got her exonerated on the retrial.
Each of these boxes represents one of the Capital Assistance Centre's cases, a collection of tragic stories. The parking fine funding means poor prisoners facing the death penalty get overworked, underpaid and under-resourced lawyers. This is how one of the centre's interns gets crucial documents to the court. Public defenders often can't afford forensic experts or investigators, unlike the prosecution that has a big budget, crime labs and the police force at its disposal.
There aren't rich people on death row. Death penalty in this country is something reserved for the poor. The old joke is that it's called capital punishment because those without the capital get the punishment.
These people are accused of or have committed very serious, heinous crimes. Why should the state spend money, taxpayers' money, on giving them a decent lawyer? Do they deserve that?
You know, I think that most people, even though most pro-death penalty, would agree that there needs to be a fair trial. If you don't have any money, you're at the mercy of the state. They are obliged to appoint you a lawyer, but a lawyer is just someone with a bar card and a pulse. We've had, in the last 8 years in Louisiana, twice as many people exonerated from death row as we've had executed. So don't tell me they're getting good lawyers at their trial to start with, and don't tell me we shouldn't be investing money and making sure that the system is fair and works properly.
But he was very excited about having a spring court date.
The centre is working on 20 death penalty cases at the moment and helping with 30 more.
Very decent care. They got him chained, lying on a bed in a jail cell in the hospital with feces and blood smeared on the wall, the whole bit. It's like, something out of the 17th century.
Because its resources are so limited, the centre relies on volunteer law students from as far away as Australia.
It's the wealthiest country in the world. But when you, particularly down here in the south, look at the quality of the criminal justice system, it looks like a third world country.
Particularly in the south. The region accounts for more than 80% of America's executions. Some people think it's a frontier mentality, a throwback to the Wild West. Others blame trigger-happy district attorneys. Or it could be that the Bible Belt wants an eye for an eye. Certainly the quality of defence lawyers is a key factor.
In Alabama, a woman was sentenced to death after a court-appointed lawyer was so drunk he was found to be in contempt of court. He spent the night in prison, and the next morning he and his client emerged from their cells and the trial resumed.
But Texas is in a league of its own. It's the United States' capital punishment capital. Texas has executed nearly 400 people since 1982, 14 this year alone. The unclaimed bodies are buried near the prison. Many of the graves are marked by a number, not a name. Calvin Bine came within days of joining them. He's been behind bars for a quarter of a century. The evidence that condemned him is still stored in the court complex, a repository of death. Bine was convicted of stabbing his male lover. He couldn't afford his own lawyer, so the court appointed Joe Cannon.
Several times I could hear the jury snickering, and they would look over, and Mr. Cannon would be sitting with his chin down on his chest, and he would just be asleep. He'd just snore. It was unreal.
After Bine was sentenced to death, a real lawyer entered the picture. Brent Newton's legal centre agreed to handle an appeal for free. He couldn't believe what he found in the trial transcripts. The prosecutor had mocked Bine's homosexuality while asking for the death penalty.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor said in words to this effect, if you send him to prison, it's going to be a good thing for him, because we all know what homosexuals do in prison.
And did the defence lawyer object to that?
No objection. It also could be that Joe Frank Cannon was a homophobe. He, both on the record and off the record, used various homophobic terms. He once referred to Calvin as a tush hog. A tush hog. He used the word faggot to refer to homosexuals. And this was a man representing a homosexual.
As Brent Newton filed his claims, Calvin Bine survived 6 execution dates. Each time, a court ordered a last-minute stay. On one occasion, the jailers said they were going to kill him anyway.
And they took Calvin all the way over to the place where they executed him. They went through all the horrific procedures that a person would go through, offering him a diaper and telling him this is what's going to happen to you and putting him in the little cell next to where they execute. All that happened when they knew there had been a stay of execution.
And I kept asking, to call my lawyer, because my lawyer was not there. I was not scheduled to be there. I already had the stay of execution. I had the paperwork. I was slapping the warden with the paperwork. And they told me that I couldn't make no phone calls, and they said until we find our paperwork, the execution will go on its schedule.
These days, Brent Newton can relax with his children, but when he was working on the Bine case, it was anything but a game. After years of litigation, he saved his client's life. The DA offered Bine a choice, another capital trial or life in prison.
So we have accepted a life sentence for you. Will you accept that deal? I said, where do I sign? Of course, I didn't want to go through that again. Harris County, you don't gamble with your life, and they're going to find you guilty.
The man who offered Calvin Bine the deal is paid to make life and death decisions. Chuck Rosenthal Jr. is the Harris County District Attorney. He sent dozens of people to death row and makes no apologies for it.
I thought about putting up billboards on the way into Harris County to say, look, if you're coming here to do a capital murder, you might very well die for it here.
Calvin Bine nearly did. The DA still thinks Bine is guilty, doubts the lawyer slept, and says it wouldn't have made much difference if he did.
If you had lawyers who slept during trials, it would, they certainly wouldn't do the best job for their client. But on the other hand, let's say that a lawyer was told by his wife that morning that she was leaving him, or that he was coming down with the flu, or other things that might also reflect on his ability to concentrate on the trial and do his best.
Chuck Rosenthal believes defendants do get adequate representation, and he says Texas is raising its standards. Given Harris County's bloodthirsty reputation, it was no surprise 2 of the courts we visited were hearing capital cases. Like the DA, Belinda Hill was elected.
Yes, we're starting a death penalty case this morning. We're going to...
There's evidence elected judges tend to appoint lawyers who are political supporters. Hardly a recipe for an independent defence.
I think that the lawyers who are on the list, particularly in these types of cases, are highly competent lawyers.
Those who have been on the other side of the bench have a different perspective.
Is that the win unit?
Ray Hill runs a radio show for prisoners and their families. It's been going for more than 20 years and receives hundreds of letters a week containing donations and solicitations.
The court will appoint you an attorney, and the person they appoint you is the one who has made the largest political contributions to the judge on the bench, because it's entirely his or her decision who gets to be a court-appointed attorney. And so then you've got a person who is beholding to the court. It's time to hunt it in a pipe chase and rattle them bars, because we can do a prison show for you right here on.
Most of the station technicians are ex-cons, armed robbers, car thieves, sex offenders. Ray Hill spent 4 years in jail himself.
I used to be a burglar. I didn't like break into people's houses and steal their cutlery. There's not much money in cutlery. I broke into their warehouses and stole their capital assets. I hear a new wind blowing in Dallas County.
Amen.
After being caught and convicted, Ray Hill received 20 consecutive 8-year sentences, 160 years in jail.
And what is he going to do?
He taught himself law in prison and did what his own lawyer couldn't, got the sentence slashed.
In American criminal justice, money, in fact, does not talk. She screams.
Sweetie, I love you so much. And I did get a letter.
Most Texas prisoners aren't given access to a phone or email. The radio show is the main way those on the inside hear from their families on the outside.
Hi, Daddy, it's me, Alexis.
Each week, wives and children call in or come in to pass on messages to a loved one. This 9-year-old's been visiting for 7 years. She sings to her father, reportedly reducing prisoners to tears.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You never know, dear, how much I love you. So please don't take my sunshine away.
Many states are trying to improve legal training and standards, but that's little comfort to those already on death row. The prisoners were convicted of terrible crimes, but if they didn't get a fair trial, then some could be innocent, victims of a system where you get the verdict you can afford. The scales of justice are tipped towards death.